name is Raimons. I'm a sommelier from Latvia. Very passionate about wine, very passionate about the wines of the Loire, and today I have the great pleasure and honor to present a very interesting topic which I believe has not been presented and touched so far. It will be about the walled vineyards of the Loire Valley. A little bit about practical information. So in front of you, you have 5 glasses. We will taste from left to right. And the plan today, although we have just 1 hour, we will try to speak a little bit about the history and the importance of the walled vineyards of the Loire Valley. So a little insight in history, viticulture, how these vineyards surrounded by these walls can influence and change the style in our glasses. And of course, we will go through and just, scratch the surface of these important appellations. Like Muscadet, Vouvray, Savagnier, and then in regards to Cabernet Franc, we will taste Saumur, Champigny, and Chinon as well. We'll talk about the climate, the soils, and we will try to do that in 58 minutes. So good luck for me and for us, and of course, if you have any questions, maybe save those for the end. If we will have time, we can touch ground for those as well. All right, so let's start, and first maybe let's talk a little bit about the history of the Clos idea and philosophy. Of course, I think the first region which comes into our minds is the famous region of Burgundy, because I think the idea, I assume, started there with the Cistercian and Benedictine monks, who were in many cases granted several famous vineyards. As an example, the Clos Vougeot, which was afterwards, when it was granted to the Cistercian abbey, it was the walls were built afterwards. So some of the oldest evidences, as you see, is from the 14th century, when the Clos started to be more important. And then I like to say, what was the original idea in those days, building those Clos? Well, first, it was very practical, because the best vineyards needed to be protected from theft. Because grapes were very precious, they were very expensive, and of course people wanted to surround the vineyards to protect them. Not only from theft, but also from different animals, which could go into the Clos actually and eat the grapes. So that's one of those reasons. The second actually is very practical as well, and it was to set a certain limit or border in order to separate this kind of unique terroir from the other vineyards which were close by. So that was, of course, also very, very important. And then, of course, an interesting fact, how the walls were built. I read some historical facts that the walls should be around 3 meters high, and the reason for that was in order not to pass it by horse. So that was kind of the height of a wall, in order not for a horse or for a horse rider not to pass the Clos, which is, I think, a very, very interesting and funny reason as well. And it should also ensure, but that's more important for the present situation, a commercial appeal, because there is a romantic story behind that, apart from the terroir and the vineyards, which the walls are surrounded. Of course, the winemakers want to have a commercial appeal and to sell the wines to the public, and I think this is a nice story also behind that. And of course, also it identifies a certain owner of the Clos as well. Interesting fact also historically, what I found that, for example, Philip the Bold in Burgundy even set a law that no animal fertilizers could be used in these special famous walled vineyards. So that means that, as I said in the beginning, the walls were also protecting these vineyards, so no animals could enter and leave behind those, let's say, fertilizers, manure, as we like to say. So that was the very important, let's say, aspect as well. And then with the French Revolution, actually, the walled vineyards started to become more and more important, and not only the walls were built from stones, but also they were surrounded by hedges, by trees, and moats as well. And then in the, let's say, middle of the 19th century, the French cadastre of vineyards started to take present, and many of those famous Clos actually were registered, which was not the case in the Loire. So in the Loire Valley, for many winemakers, it was quite expensive to maintain and to build those walls. So a practical, let's say, reason. And also, what differentiated them from Burgundy, which was already very famous for those vineyards, that they didn't saw the commercial appeal, maybe, and it was not for them of that importance to have it registered in the French register of vineyards. In the 1950s, after the Second World War, actually, we can see a slow degradation of many of those vineyards. And the reason why I'm sitting now today with you, actually one of the reasons, is to bring this wonderful historic story back and to show the beauty and also the importance of terroir, of these wonderful enclosed vineyards of the Loire Valley. Also interesting in terms of laws and regulations, I also spoke with Vincent Liobeau from his family winery, and some interesting facts. So if you have a Clos and if you want to put it on label, it should be registered and approved by ENAO. So it should be approved, and to be approved, actually, of course, there are certain aspects taken care of. Of course, the importance of terroir and the quality of the wines, the history, actually. And also, if you want to put the Clos on the back label, all the, let's say, grapes harvested should come exactly from this specific Clos. And also, it should be part of an AOC wine. So if it is not part of any appellation, you can't actually put it on the label. So, I really liked this, let's say, sentence. What we still need to keep in mind as one of the most important aspects, of course, apart from the practical, that the walls were built afterwards, but the terroir was already there. It was discovered by man, by monks, by winemakers, and then at certain level the walls were built. So I think with this point in our minds, we should continue and taste all the wines, because the main aspect is the terroir, is the soil, is the aspect, is the wind, is the microclimate, is the mesoclimate, and of course reflected through a typical variety with the magical touch of the winemaker. And then, interestingly enough, I had the chance to collect interesting information how these walled vineyards can influence the viticulture in these vineyards. So I think this is very important. What makes it different apart from the terroir? And these are the, let's say, some of the most important facts which I have gathered for you to keep in mind when we will taste the wines, actually. So, of course, first is the climate. And as you know, there is the big climate, the mesoclimate, the microclimate. So we are speaking more about mesoclimate. So imagine on one slope there are two vineyards, and the one surrounded by the wall, of course, will have a slightly different mesoclimate. So mesoclimate is the neighboring vineyard, let's say like that. But then there can be also some differences in the microclimate. And microclimate can be, imagine if there is a 2-hectare Clos, so you can have the higher altitude in the same vineyard, the lower altitude with more humidity. You can have maybe a few rows which were shadowed by the wall, so you have less sunlight, for example. So we are speaking actually about some differences even in the Clos in regards to microclimate, which can influence as well. Erosion. So interesting that depending on the winemaker, the answers were different. Some winemakers said yes, it helps to prevent the erosion, but that really depends on the size. Because imagine if you have a Clos maybe 1.8 hectares, yes, the erosion can be, let's say, prevented because it's rather small and the walls protect it from that. But if you have a larger Clos, let's say 10, 15, 20 hectares, still the earth might come down and you need to bring it back at some point. So that is really, again, quite expensive to do that manually. So erosion really depends on the size of the vineyard. The walls protect the vineyards from winds, so that makes, again, the special microclimate. That can be very beneficial during colder vintages because the maturity can be more advanced because the winds cannot enter the Clos as it would do in the neighboring vineyard without the Clos. So the microclimate and the mesoclimate of a Clos can be more dry, more windy, more warm, actually. And that could be, let's say, maybe a little bit more challenging in a very sunny and warm vintage. So again, really depends on the vintage, of course, and the size of the vineyard. The walls actually can act as a warm sink, so it can preserve the warmth during the day and give back to the vineyards during the night, during the cold nights, and that can again influence the ripeness of the grapes, which is again a very important aspect. But maybe a slight drawback could be that there is, at certain point, less air circulation. So if there is a lot of humidity, because the wind cannot access the Clos, you might have some problems with disease and some humidity. Okay, and again, just to conclude, a practical in many of those Clos, it is all about the manual harvest and all work done by hand. Because from the practical point, some machines cannot enter the Clos. So that is more expensive, more labor intense. Now we can, let's say, start slowly to taste the wines. And the first appellation we're going to look at is Muscadet. Muscadet, Sèvres et Maine. Sorry, my French. And more importantly, one of those important crus, today we taste Clisson. So here you can see, I think maps are extremely important where we are. This is even a closer look. We are in the Muscadet Sèvres et Maine, and you can see also the Clisson as a cru. This is a nice map, actually. You can see all the crus, and what you notice that Clisson is in the very southern part. So it has a slightly warmer microclimate there, mesoclimate, sorry. Shortly about the soils, I think it's very important to understand in general points the soils of the Loire Valley. So basically we can divide it into two parts. So the western part, which is closer to the ocean, is originated from a very old, one of the oldest, let's say, soils in France and in the Loire for sure, from Armorian Massif, 6 million years ago. And these are the soils. If you look at Anjou, from the city of Angers and to the western part. And this is called Anjou Noir, the terroir is called Anjou Noir. And basically it's about granite, about slate, schist, gabbro. So these volcanic soils, very old, very rocky soils. And of course, it gives a totally different profile. And then on the right, not on the right, but to the east from Angers, we talk about the Paris Basin, which is originated from actually two periods, Cretaceous, approximately 65 million years back, and then we speak about the Jurassic period, which is 190 million years back. And then depending where you are in Tours or even in the central Loire of Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, we speak about those bedrocks from the ancient sea. So you have a lot of chalk, limestone, tuffeau, silex, flint. It's a very complex soils, but these soils are not volcanic origin. These are from the old sea base which was there. And of course the Kimmeridgian soils, which are more present in Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, similar soils to those of Chablis. So this is just, you know, the diversity of soils, as you can see, for each appellation. Climate is also very important, of course. The closer you are to the ocean, like in case of Muscadet, the more oceanic influence you have with more humidity. You don't have those, let's say, big temperature differences as you would have in the continental climate. And the climate is slightly, let's say, temperate with more humidity. And also you have, let's say, more frost potential also here, as in 2021, for example. So a climate which is defined also by disease pressure, but as nature actually balances everything out, so thanks to those slaty, schisty, rocky soils, you can, let's say, cope better with the humidity as you would not do maybe in other soils. And then if we touch specifically the cru of Clisson, so as I said, it's the southern part with the famous Clisson granitic bedrock, the mother rock, what you have there. And then on the top, still you have a lot of decomposed smaller particles of clay and sands and granite as well. So this soil gives advanced ripeness. It's a warm soil actually, which results in slightly more powerful wines. And also because of the southern location of Clisson, the style usually is a little bit more richer. And in combination with lower yields and longer aging on the lees, which is minimum 2 years in the Cahier des Charges, the result are more generous wines. We were actually, a funny story is that you have heard that in Muscadet they like to put on the label sur lie, because the aging on the lees is very important for the Muscadet grape and for the appellation itself. But actually, the winemakers so age the wines in this case for 2 years minimum. But funny enough, they can't put sur lie on the label. So maybe in the future. So this is just the picture of the Clisson granite. Maybe the picture itself shows the primary rock and the bedrock, but the top of the subsoil and the topsoil is more decomposed granite and clays. So the roots really can go and hit the mother rock. Let's speak a little bit about Melon Muscadet. So it's a high-yielding neutral grape variety with bright acidity and steely character, and it needs those aging on the lees to give a little bit of texture and character. And this grape really reflects the terroir beautifully. And now we can taste the first wine. So it's from the family Libaud. And since we have Vincent here, maybe I can kindly ask you to come and speak a little bit about your wine, if you don't mind.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Thank you for your introduction, Raymond.
My pleasure.
So just a quick remind about the cru of Muscadet. You can keep in mind that there are 3 main points about these new amazing appellations from Muscadet. First of all, about the terroir, a unique diversity of metamorphic and plutonic rock. Secondly, the unique grape we have there, which is melon grape that comes from Burgundy from the 12th century and which is a brother of the Chardonnay. And the third point is about the unique winemaking we use in our region, which is long lees aging. We use no oak at all, no barrel. We use instead some concrete vats that are underground and covered with tiled glass. And in order to produce these new appellations, we need to keep the wine between harvest and bottling minimum 2 years, which is almost unique for dry white wines in France. So about our cuvée Clisson from Clos de la Placelière. First of all, let's say for me as a winemaker, it's always such a pleasure to work in such an amazing landscape and inspiring place as a Clos. Clos de la Placelière is about 20 hectares of vineyard surrounded by a very big wall of 3 meters high and 50 centimeters thick. On the most aged vines, which are 50 years old, we produce this cuvée. It's produced organically. We pick the grapes manually, and then the grapes are carried to the cellar. We do a native yeast fermentation in order to really reflect the pure expression of the terroir. And then it's followed by 2 years of aging in concrete underground vats, with also another traditional winemaking method, which is bâtonnage. Bâtonnage means when we use a tool to mix the lees with the wine all along aging. We do it about once a month during the 2 years of aging, and this gives you a unique style, a unique expression of dry white wine with a nice bitterness, length, and I will let Raymond describe the wine. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Very nice. Yeah, I think, as I said, Melon is a neutral variety. So it needs a specific terroir in order to be expressed in the best way. And in this case, of course, the aromatics are very refined. It's not jumping out of the glass. And I think Muscadet, for me personally, is one of those white wines where I tend to speak about this very famous but mystic word, minerality. And I will leave geologists to do the science. But for me personally, I think it's about texture, and it's about, in this case, a very pleasant saline presence in the wine. We can speak about crushed, let's say, salty rocks. And of course, we don't know, is it from the proximity of the salty winds of the oceans which surround the vineyards? Is it from the Clisson granite? Let's leave that to the nature. But we can't deny that this wine has a wonderful kind of saline freshness going through the wine, which makes it beautiful, balanced, and very long. And of course, it's supported by the wonderful wealth and generosity of the lees aging. There is no oak whatsoever here, and I think despite the very warm and sunny vintage of 2020, the terroir has done a great job, and we have a well-retained freshness, even though the wine for Muscadet and for the grape, it's quite generous and rich, which I personally really like, which gives way to wonderful complexity of wine and food matching, of course. Okay, apart from the story of Vincent, this is a very old Clos since the 1747, and I have written down for me a beautiful story about the name, which at present day says Liobeau, but actually the story says that a child was born whose name was Joseph Grégoire, and his surname was given Beaulieu, from the beautiful place where this small child was found. So that's the origin of the name, which I thought, when going through the history, was worth to mention to you. And hopefully this romantic story gives the wine another dimension of flavor. All right, let's go. I'm watching into my phone because I want to keep track of my time. We still have 35 minutes to go and 4 wines to taste. So let's go to the next appellation and story, which is the Savenier appellation, and we are moving from the ocean a little bit away towards the city of Angers. And Savenier appellation is a very small appellation, as you can see. It is in terms of 3 communes, and historically the wines actually were really famous, more famous for the sweetness, but actually nowadays I think that's the global trend we can see everywhere. The winemakers produce basically, I would say, the dry wines of the Chenin Blanc variety. So that means that the sweet wines with some sugar are becoming a little bit like a rarity. But nevertheless, I think one of the most famous appellations for the Chenin Blanc grape variety, which is a very unique terroir, as you can see. Let's have a closer look. So the climate is still influenced by the ocean, but it's what we call semi-oceanic influence. So the humidity is less. And also it's driven by the south-southeast facing quite steep slope of the Savagnier. So the vineyards are more protected from the winds. It is more dry, more warm, with naturally very low yields, which actually for quality wines made from the Chenin Blanc variety, which is a very generous variety, high-yielding variety, is of course very beneficial. And historically, of course, since we are very close to the Loire River, the humidity and all the terroir characteristics and factors, they were very suitable for production of the botrytis, the noble rot, both in sweet wines, more importantly, of course, but also some producers tend to use botrytis also in the dry wines as well. So the climate, in 2 words, is more dry and more continental here. The soils, I think this map is very important. You see, we are still in the city of Angers. Here, you see. So that means we're still in the Anjou Noir terroir. I will save my time, and as I said, the origin is from these very old 600 million years Massif, Amorcian Massif. So these slaty, schisty, dark soils, which are also very typical for the Savagniers appellation, and supported by the quite steepness of the slope. If you compare, for example, with the Muscadet and Clisson, so the slope is much more steep. And what does it mean? I like this wonderful small map or a snapshot of the vineyard. So the steepness, of course, can concentrate the sunlight. It's a better exposition, and also driven by the southern and southeast, depends which vineyards, which producers. It has excellent sun exposure. And you have a really great still windy ventilation, which protects the wines from humidity and disease pressure as well. The soil in general, it's about schist and slate, but of course you find also in some places like the topsoil with some sand and clay as well. So I really like these small maps, and as you can see, the small circle surrounds the specific Clos. Clos de Perrières, which we will taste with the next producer. So as you can see, the location is just next to the small city of Savagnier. Just to relax from the technical slides and facts, let's have a look on some pictures. As you can see here, quite steep. At some points there are terraces, actually. A very historic region, actually, with big influence from the monks as well. And then let's have a closer look. There's the Chenin Blanc variety. First, what I would like to say, and what makes sense for me to understand better the variety, some people compare it, this is the French answer to German Riesling. I don't know if it is a good comparison, but there are some similarities. Both grape varieties are very unique. It can produce bone dry wines, off-dry, semi-sweet, sweet, luscious sweet, with botrytis. It can produce also excellent sparkling wines, similar like Riesling does. It has high acidity. So these are the factors which actually are quite similar. And having a closer look, so as I said, it can give very generous yields, so it really needs to be controlled by the humans. It has relatively thick skin, so sometimes we speak about phenolics in Chenin Blanc. So that can be a positive aspect. It can give a texture for the wine, another dimension. It can add aging potential. So I think that is beneficial. It is high in acid, as I said, very diverse in styles. And then depending where you are, there are different styles of wines. You have mineral, kind of steely character. You can have citrus fruits. You can have more yellow, ripe orchard fruits like yellow plums, quince, and you can have stone fruits as well. Really depends on the vintage, on the climate, on the terroir, and on the magical touch of the winemaker. If people ask me, I need a white wine to have a great aging potential, actually Chenin Blanc is one of those grapes which can age gracefully. So it's a high quality grape variety which really can age for many years. And in terms of winemaking, we see some new barrels, but actually the global trend actually is more towards used old large size casks in order not to overpower the character of the Chenin Blanc variety. Okay, so now I think we're ready to taste the second wine, which is from Chateau Souchery. And so the winery is actually the vineyard is very old, but the winery actually is relatively young, from the 1950s, when it was established by the Thigeot family, by Pierre-Yves Thigeot, which actually built the reputation of this winery. And he bought actually this specific Clos, which is a small Clos, only 1.8 hectares, in early 90s. However, the history actually went on, and unfortunately, he had to sell his winery because he fell ill actually, and he just wanted to be safe and guarantee. So he sold the winery, and nowadays it's run by Roger François Béguigneux. Sorry, my French. It's a 28 hectares organically certified vineyard, and let's taste the wine together. I believe there is no one from Chateau Souchery here, so I will take the responsibility on presenting the wine. So, this is organic, 100% Chenin Blanc. In the vineyard, since it's very small, all is done by hand. There is a horse who does also part of the work. And the soil is schist with a little bit of sand. So, actually, we know that there is a big problem of frost, not only in Loire, but in many French vineyards. So since 2020, there are warming wires in the Clos protecting the grapes from the frost. And I can imagine that helped in the terrible 2021 vintage, since they were installed already in 20. The wine is aged, so 10 months in 500-liter casks, and 20% is new. The nose is actually quite generous, because 2019 was also as a vintage, quite warm and sunny. And as I said, the vineyard and the appellation of 7 years is a steep southern slope, so that even adds to the ripeness and complexity, the ripeness of the fruit. And you can feel definitely the lees contact, so you have some beeswax creaminess. And I've heard also from many professionals that some people like to compare 7 years specifically with the wines of Burgundy, which is, I think, fair enough and a very good comparison. However, I think the wine displays, I think, more nervy and vibrant freshness, tension and the acidity, which is so typical to the Chenin Blanc variety. On the palate has a high flavor concentration. The palate is immediately mouth-watering. It's full of acidity and freshness, despite the quite sunny and warm vintage. You have a lot of ripe, fresh, crispy stone fruits in combination with wonderful beeswax creaminess, and also this kind of slight mineral, stony presence as well in this wonderful wine. The style actually of this vineyard and also the winemaking is to present Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon in particular through a very fresh and precise style. But I think nevertheless a great expression of Sauvignons. And as you can see, I think the wine has enough density, weight, concentration, which will give a graceful aging for this wine to change. I've been very lucky to taste some older vintages of Sauvignon, dry wines from the 90s, and these wines really can age. And it's one of the, I think, through the last 10-15 years, one of the appellations which is really becoming more and more important and famous, specifically among professionals. And personally, I really like to talk about Chenin Blanc as a variety. I think it needs more attention because Loire as a region is undervalued, and so is Sauvignons and Chenin Blanc as well. All right, let me just double check. Let's go further. Okay, we're still good on the time. Let's go to Vouvray, the famous appellation of the Touraine. So we are moving even more away from the ocean. So the continental influence is even more significant, making it more continental, more dry, more warm, with less humidity. The summers are more hot and dry, and the winters can get more cold, comparing with those vineyards closer to the Nantes city. And of course, when we speak about Touraine as an appellation, as a sub-region of the Loire, I think a lot of people consider Vouvray as one of the most historically and famous appellation of this area. But I believe for a lot of people, when they hear Vouvray, at least back in my country, people think about sweet wines. And again, we can see this global trend that a lot of winemakers are producing more and more dry wines. And actually, what was interesting for me when I checked some data, that I think even more, over 50% of the production are sparkling wines, which is quite surprising to me. Yeah. So, Vouvray. I spoke about the climate, so just to give you an idea, we are almost 230 kilometers away from the ocean. So, as I said, the influence of the ocean is even less. And speaking about the terroir, so now we are moving away from the Anjou Noir, so the schist, the granite, the slate, and we are going into this Paris basin. As I said, it's an ancient bedrock, so the origin, the bedrock, is actually calcareous, so you can find a lot of argile calcaire, so the limestone, the clay, the sand, and also some flint, some silex, which gives, of course, a totally different character to the wine, and which also defines slightly different grape varieties. In Vouvray, we speak about Pérouche. Sorry again. So Pérouche is a soil which has a lot of clay, limestone, and these flint, which can add a specific smoky dimension to the wines. And we speak about the stony clay limestones called Abouilly. The appellation itself, again, is also not a big appellation, but as I said, the sparkling wines of the Vouvray, they are 60% of the production. And in regards to Chenin Blanc, we produce not only dry wines, but of course, historically, the sweet wines were the famous ones historically. And nowadays, although the appellation allows up to 5% this old Orbois variety, it is very rarely used. So most of the wines are 100% Chenin Blanc. So this is a unique map which I found on the internet. I have some old copies of L'Armand maps at my home. I really like to go back and compare the Louis and Clos of actually present day. And believe me or not, the majority of the famous vineyards were already listed in those old L'Armand maps. I've pointed out this specific Clos de la Roche vineyard, which is just on the outskirts of the Vouvray city. And if you look at the appellation here, so the best vineyards are located on the coteaux, where you have a gentle slope, where you have more shallow soil on the top, so the grapevines actually can hit the bedrock more efficiently and more easy, in comparison to maybe the plateau, which is slightly more away from the small, narrow creeks and rivers. Still giving way for very good wines, but those mostly are used maybe for the sparkling wines, where these wines tend to reach maturity with more problems. And if you have the coteaux, the prime sides, they have slight aspect, so better sun exposure, better soils, less clay, more rocky. And due to those factors, you can produce excellent ripeness in the grapes and more concentration. And these are the places where the best vineyards are historically located. So I kindly asked the next winemaker, which is Vincent Carême. I don't see Vincent here, probably busy. Yeah, so he sent some pictures. We can see him probably here in the shadow. You see, he's taking pictures of this Clos de la Roche vineyard. So you can see here, beautiful vineyard. The picture is obviously now from the winter. And this is the wine itself. So it's a Clos since the 16th century. And Vincent Carême took over in the very complicated vintage of 99 with a lot of humidity and grey rot. So it was a challenging vintage. He's running the winery organically. He has his partner, wife Tanya, next to him. And he's the young generation, very famous winemaker actually, a very good example to many young talented winemakers. And interestingly enough, his wife is South African born, so they do produce also some Chenin Blanc in Swartland, which I never tried, unfortunately, but looking forward to. So they experience with Chenin Blanc is not only French, but also South African. And South Africa has far more vineyards, actually, of Chenin Blanc than France does. And it's found a wonderful home, actually, outside France for the Chenin Blanc. So he's a pioneer, actually, of organic viticulture in Vouvray. And this is a relatively new wine. I think the first vintage was 2020. for this specific Clos. Before that, the wines were too young because they were planted in 2012. And they were just, in Vincent's perspective, just a little bit too young to be used as a single wine. So they were part of a blend in different wines. And I think 2020 was the first vintage when we can see Clos de la Roche Vouvray from Vincent Carême. The terroir is Aubouilly, so it's stony clay and limestone. It's a really nice slope with a southwest exposure. It sees maybe a little bit more of the evening warmer sun, which is good. And the vinification is 50% in 400-liter barrels and 50% in steel, and 9 months also in 50% steel and barrel aging. It's a dry Vouvray with 3.5 grams per liter. And let's taste. For me, Vouvray, and it will be maybe sound a bit weird for you, I have this kind of slight earthy woolness. I don't know how to translate it in French, but a slight kind of presence of wool, which is positive for me personally, apart from the fruity character. And of course, because of the oak and the lees contact, it displays wonderful texture and creaminess and beeswax, a little bit of honey. And actually, from the nose, when you approach the wine, it even seems a little bit sweet in a positive way. But the wine is, of course, bone dry. Structure-wise, it's a quite concentrated and big wine. From the very sunny 2022 vintage, we can see that the ripeness is there, the generosity of fruit is there. It has a slight sweet presence, being a dry wine, of course. And in my opinion, for my palate, you all are professionals, so I will leave it up to you. But for my palate, the bright acidity of Chenin Blanc is more present in the Savagniers. And I think it's a very good exercise to compare these two great appellations side by side. Of course, the vintages are different, but still, very nice to compare and go back to the Savagnier, which maybe comparing with the Vouvray will taste even more bone dry than this one. But being a sommelier, I think this Vouvray, because it has this kind of slight fruitiness and sweetness, will be wonderful with a broader style of cuisine. The sweetness can go excellent with spicy food, with sweetness in the dishes. So I think if you have an oriental curry, tagine, sweet and sour, spicy influenced dish, this wine will be absolutely wonderful to go. All right, so I think we can move on for the red wines, and let's have a closer look, and let's go a little bit back. Let's go to Murs Champigny, which has again as an appellation very famous among red wines, along with Chinon, which we'll taste as the last wine. So the climate is semi-continental again. We are going a bit closer to the ocean, but the origin actually of Murs Champigny, from Latin, it means campus igni, so field of fire. So the climate actually, due to the mesoclimate and the slopes, it has less rainfall. It's actually quite warm, sunny, and the ripeness can be very, very high in this appellation. So we are in the Paris Basin, so we are back on the soils which are originated from the bedrock, so limestone, tuffeau, sand, versus, you know, the Anjou Noir. So, and again, this is a small kind of picture of the terroir. So when we speak about Cabernet Franc as a variety and the terroir of Chinon, Murs, Champigny, we speak about tuffeau. So the limestone, which is quite porous, which provides a perfect drainage. So if you have a wet vintage, similar like chalk, it can save some water and give back maybe to the warm months of summer if needed. So acts as a sponge, of course, which is very, very beneficial for the grapes. The appellation itself is, as you can see, it's 1,600 hectares. It stipulates only 100% red wines, minimum Cabernet Franc, 85%. And some people might say that it's really the essence of the Cabernet Franc of the Loire, with elegance, freshness, purity, florality, generous fruit. And the aromatic complexity is really, really high here. Let's talk a little bit about Cabernet Franc as a variety. So the origin, people say it's southwest France or northern Spain. Depends from which, let's say, books you read. It's a variety which I like to compare, of course, with Cabernet Sauvignon. And it ripens a little bit more earlier. It still displays the dark fruit side with pyrazines, as we like to talk. So it has this kind of herbal, spicy character, similar like Cabernet Sauvignon does. It tends to have elevated, very fresh acidity, which is, of course, very important. But the structure, the alcohol, the body is slightly less than the Cabernet Sauvignon. And the typical flavors, of course, depending on the style of vintage, of terroir, can be everything like dark fruits, cassis. Then you have these wonderful, fresh, herbaceous notes, spiciness. And for me, Cabernet Franc always displays a certain level of earthiness, leather, tobacco. So apart from the fruit side, it has this kind of earthy mineral character as well, which is really typical to the variety. Graphite, we like to say, pencil shavings, some people would like to compare. But we will see in the wine. And we can see, I think, a global trend for this variety coming back, not only in France and Europe, but also in the New World. And I can hear that Cabernet Franc as a variety is experiencing a renaissance as a variety, because apart from the Loire, it always was more like a blending partner, an insurance policy. If Cabernet Sauvignon as a variety maybe did wrong or not good enough in a specific vintage. So again, we have the map of Murs Champigny, and we can see where the Clos is located. If you want to have the presentation, maybe I can agree with the people from Interloire. We can post it, or I don't know, send. You can have it afterwards. So the next story is about Clos Cristal, which is probably, again, one of the most historic and great vineyards. Some pictures which are really important to say. So Clos Cristal was established by Antoine Cristal, who originally came from the textile business. He bought this vineyard in the late 19th century, and then he ordered to build the walls, which took almost 6 years. And these are the walls, and this Clos is not only surrounded by the walls, it has walls inside the vineyard. So it has walls going from west to south, from west to east, and from north to south. And as you can see, the wines actually are planted and grown through the walls, which is quite unique. And you might think, why is that? So I read some historical facts, and it is said and believed that he had this idea from the vineyards of Thomery, which historically were planted with Chasselas, and it's north of Paris. And the people there planted those vineyards along the walls to get ripeness, to get the grapes ripe in those, cool conditions. So Antoine Cristal was the pioneer of grafting after the phylloxera. He was one of the first who started to train the wines along the wires. And he was the man who started to plant Cabernet Franc, actually, in an Appalachian region which was driven by white wines. And he has this mind and idea to produce something similar of high quality, like the wines of red Burgundy, of whom he was very fond of. So that's the original idea. But then, at the beginning of the early 1920s, he donated the vineyards to the local hospital because he did not have any children. So he donated the vineyards to this hospital, hospice. And through the history and now, the wines have been tended and taken care of many different winemakers. Let me see if yeah, so as you saw, the idea of these walls, that you have the wine plants on the north side, then the trunk goes through the wall, and it is exposed in the southern part, so it gets most of the ripeness and exposition to the sun. Does that make any difference for the wine plant itself? No. But it makes difference of advanced ripening. So the ripening can be up to 2-3 weeks earlier than other vineyards, which again is more important for cool vintages. So let's taste the wine, since we are running out of time, sorry. So this is 2019 vintage Murs Champigny. It's 10 hectares, organic farming, south-facing, with quite low yields. The terroir is tuffeau, the limestone. Hand harvest, 100% stemmed, which is very important because Cabernet Franc can be the grape which can have whole bunch versus the stem. Maceration with pumping over, remontage, as you would like to say here in France, and aging 18 months in 500-liter barrels. For me, this nose is with no doubt and mistake Cabernet Franc. Wonderful red and dark fruits with great maturity, excellent ripeness, floral notes of violets, and I think we can really smell the earthy character of Cabernet Franc, the mineral aspect, which is even more intriguing and complex in red wines than in white wines. But I like to call it this earthiness, stoniness, pencil shaving, leatheriness, what we can feel apart from the fruit side of this wine. And the spicy, herbaceous character as well. On the palate, the wine is still young, of course. It has a wonderful texture, chalky, sandy texture from the tannins. They're quite marked, but they're fine-grained. They're not rough. They're ripe, which is very important, and they're really balanced. They add a certain level of freshness. Not only the acidity gives freshness for this wine, but this slight bitterness and textural dimension also is very, very present in the wine. But I think it's very elegant, very refined, with great purity of fruit. It is not a big wine, and I think this is the key of Cabernet Franc, why, you know, wine lovers specifically like it, that it has this additional sense of freshness and brightness to the fruit if you compare with Cabernet Sauvignon. So it has some lift and energy, and it's maybe drinking more easy than it would be to have a Cabernet Sauvignon based wine here. Right. And let's finish our wonderful experience with the walled vineyards of the Loire, and let's go and let's taste the Clos Cristal, which is located in Chinon. So not Clos Cristal, Clos del Écho, sorry. So that's in the pardon, that's in the city of Chinon, as you can see here. The climate here is pretty much the same, semi-oceanic with a huge continental influence. The appellation is on the confluence of the Vienne and the Loire rivers, and the rainfall is relatively low. The soils were still with a lot of tuffeau, and more specifically the tuffeau jaune, the yellow one. I will show you a picture, and these supposed to be, you know, the best terraces, because you have the three main soils there. You have the sandy soils, you have the hillsides with a lot of clay and flint, but the best wines again are on the slopes, on the coteaux, which is basically the yellow tuffeau. But you have some Cris Blanc, which is more maybe porous, more chalky, as you can see in the picture here, and you have the tuffeau jaune, the yellow one. So an appellation for red and rosé wines. You can find some pretty rare, but you can find some white Chinon as well, which is 100% Chenin. And Chinon is the generous, the complex, the rich, the more dense style of Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley, in generally speaking, of course. And this Clos has a wonderful story, actually, again. So, Echo, like historically, the young man of Chinon would go to the wall and call out, are the women or girls of the Chinon faithful? And the wall, of course, would say no. but the story is that this wall actually provides a very good echo. So you can try one day out. I haven't done that, but this is the romantic story behind that. And the Clos is there since 1921, when the winery has been established. It's called Coulier du Thiel. It has been run by two families, actually, father and son team. And it's hand harvest. It's 17 hectares. It used to be actually planted with Chenin Blanc historically as well, and the terroir is the tuffeau, the clay limestone. It's a big Clos, so you have also some northern aspect and northern exposure, which has a little bit of blue clay. And this northern part, as I said, it's a totally different microclimate. And according to the winemaker, only in the most warmest vintages, the northern side is used also in the blend, which was the case in 2018, which was very sunny and warm vintage. So it's 100% destemmed, and because of the warm vintage, the vinification is 100% in stainless steel. And the philosophy also of the winery has changed actually in the 2000s approximately, when the winemaker had experience actually in the New World, and he wanted to make more precise, more fruit-driven, more fresher style of Cabernet Franc. So this style, I think it's immediately clear. We are speaking about richness, density, immense concentration. The tannins are much more marked here. They're grainy and chalky, but still, I think, ripe and pleasant. And of course, this wine is still really, really young. And I think the earthy kind of beetrooty side of the Cabernet Franc is even more present here through this wine. I think this wine needs more attention and maybe more experience. This wine maybe is not the floral, the pure fruity style of Cabernet Franc side. Nevertheless, I think it has great aging potential. And the grace and the true face of this wine, of course, will be revealed through the next, 10, 15 years, I suppose. But at the moment, yeah, I think it's still young. And my compliments actually to the service team here. I came a little bit before, and I hope you noticed the temperature. And I think the red wines were served perfectly, slightly chilled, because I think the biggest problem nowadays, we drink too cold white wines and too warm red wines. But the temperature has been really nice, and I think specifically a great white wine reflects itself even better with a slightly raise of the temperature. And the great red wines, including Chinon and Murs Champigny, they show more better with a slightly cooler temperature. We run out of time. As you noticed, I speak too much sometimes, but I think the main message for you, besides these 5 wonderful appellations and terroirs, the 3 unique grape varieties of the Loire Valley, the story actually is that not only Burgundy has famous Clos, but Loire Valley has really nice and romantic stories. It is a region which really needs more attention, and I think hopefully with this masterclass, and hopefully also with your help, you will bring the story back to the end consumer, and you will have another kind of experience from these wonderful vineyards and Clos and grape varieties. So thank you very much for your attention. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but I wish you a pleasant time in Vinexpo Paris. Thank you so much.